Hey, what's up, guys? Matthew here with Transcendent Films. Today we're doing a very special episode.
Yes, we are. This is Mitch here, and we're talking about Rogue One, giving us our reaction. We saw it last night, the first showing at our local theater, and this review is going to be spoiler-free. We're doing a spoiler-free and then one with spoilers as well. This
All
one's spoiler-free, so feel safe to watch through this whole video.
all right, just we're gonna get into it just right away. We're gonna talk about the positives first, and then we're gonna talk about the negatives at the end. I'll start it off. Basically, this movie. I mean, I know like last year for a lot of people, it was the first Star Wars movie in like what 12 years. And it was huge. Force Awakens is the highest grossing Star Wars movie of all time. It was charming. It was delightful. It brought us back into Star Wars the way that we kind of wanted it to feel. But I will be honest. This was it for me. This was the Star Wars movie that brought me home, that made me feel like how it used to be in the original trilogy. And I think that Disney has it down pat. Gareth Edwards had it down pat. This is for me like one of the most flawless, one of the most perfect Star Wars movies around. It's a perfect example of what Star Wars needs to be, what it should be, and it was a very, very good blend of bringing the prequel trilogy and moving it towards the original trilogy. Now, this movie takes place about a week before New Hope. So there's really no spoilers in that. We all knew that this movie was going to be very, very close prequel to New Hope. You know, this is the movie that tells the story of how the rebels got the plans to the Death Star. So really that's no spoilers. That's what this movie is about. If just to clarify, this movie is not a sequel to Force Awakens. I know there are quite a few people actually out there, and the way that this movie actually starts out, I could understand where some people could launch into this movie and really see and think that this could be a sequel to Force Awakens. But no, it is a prequel. Has nothing to do. This takes place about like 35, 40 years before Force Awakens. It is, it's a phenomenal prequel. It's, in my opinion, one of the best Star Wars movies ever made. Going over directly into some positives. Mitch, why don't you start off with like your biggest positives about this movie?
Well, like Matt said, this is definitely, I think, one of the best Star Wars films ever made. I'm putting it right now at number 2, right behind Empire Strikes Back, because Empire Strikes Back is pretty untouchable. But for me, the positives of this film was really, first of all, like the CGI, the FX, all the special effects. I mean, they look so damn good. Stunning. A lot of these like war shots were just immaculate, and the detail in them was just so pristine, and it looked so realistic, and it fit in so well with the practical effects. Another great thing about this movie was I loved all the characters. All the characters are really good, and
K2SO. K2SO was easily
K2SO is a new droid, and he's probably the biggest standout of the movie. But they were all very compelling, and they were compelling at the right times, and they helped drive the story forward. And all the characters were utilized very well, and there was not really a lot of throwaway characters for the most part. The only one you could argue is Forrest Whitaker's character may be a throwaway character, kind of.
To point on that, I really liked Saw Gerrera in the movie. I understood, like, I didn't love his character in the movie. I don't think he was really supposed to be like a big standout in the movie. It made sense having him in there. It made sense for him to be this rebellious rebellion or rebellious rebel. The fact that he's like, if we saw him like back in Star Wars: The Clone Wars series, he was an extremist. I mean, obviously he was a rebel. He hated the Empire. He hated oppression. He hated the what are they called again? The Federation of Douchebags or whatever the hell it was from the prequel trilogy. The Trade Federation. Yeah. But Saw Gerrera's character I thought was actually very well utilized. They didn't use him too much. He wasn't used too little. He fit into the story basically for me perfectly. It didn't detract from it. It kind of added more to it. I mean, to take it actually back to Force Awakens, because I want to touch on the humor in this movie. The humor in this movie was a huge positive.
Perfect, yeah.
And to touch on the Force Awakens, I mean, Force Awakens and the prequel trilogy for me didn't get the humor entirely right. Obviously, Force Awakens it had some pretty funny.
Really didn't get it And then you and I kind of disagree. I think that in Force Awakens, it was pretty good. In this movie, I think it was far better. And I know you didn't really love all of the points because at some points it didn't seem like it fit very well into
Mhm.
like the theme or what was happening in that specific scene. I
Yeah.
thought it was pretty good, but this one it was perfect. Like it
Mhm.
was so good. It really like I mean, this is the most I've ever laughed in a Star Wars movie, and it wasn't because I was watching the prequels and laughing at how bad it was. It was actually the movie that was very funny.
Yeah, and it's a very, very good movie. I mean, the humor in this movie, like when I talk about like how I didn't like some of the humor in Force Awakens, it's because some of it felt dry, some of it felt very forced and written. Whereas this, it made sense. When they had humor in it, it was just like humor that made sense. And
Yeah.
most of the humor in this movie circles around K2SO, and they give backstory as to
Yeah.
it's not like he's trying to be funny. It's this he's a droid, and some things he says are just funny because he's a droid. He
Yeah.
speaks his mind.
Yeah, and what they said was it's like he got reconditioned, and so he just kind of says whatever he says, and then in some cases, based on social cues, it's not something you would say, so it ends up being pretty funny. But there actually was a lot of humor throughout this whole movie, which was very surprising to me.
Yeah, and
Probably
for
the most
me,
of any Star Wars film, really.
yeah, and for me, it felt like Han Solo kind of humor. Like when Han Solo would have like a quip, and it would be kind of condescending, but at the same time, it'd be like kind of condescending, but at the same time, it'd be so funny and witty, and it would be
Yeah,
like
exactly.
banter
Yeah.
humor, which
Hmm.
which made a lot of sense for me. So I definitely think that this movie is a lot better than Force Awakens, and the more I think about Rogue One, the better it gets. I I love this movie. And to touch more on the positives, I mean, like Mitch had said, the CGI, the special effects, and visual effects are amazing in this movie. And I'm going to go ahead and say that I think it's some of the best ever put to film.
Yeah, without a
Go,
doubt.
Mitch, you've never heard me say this, and you know how religious I am about this, but I'm going to say that I think the visual effects and CGI in this movie are the best and best utilized since Jurassic
Yes,
Park. I
for
think
sure.
that yeah,
I agree with
easily.
that.
I mean, some of the visual effects and special effects. I mean, the size, the scope, how good it looked. It looked real,
Yeah,
and it felt like it was actually there. And it's in some of
yeah,
the. I have to say, like some of the visual effects in this movie and some of the CGI is some of the most revolutionary. We've seen some. We've seen some of the things that they did in this movie. We've seen them try and do it before, but it's never entirely worked out perfectly. But there was one instance of CGI in this movie, which is uh, like amazing. It is
yeah.
absolutely insane.
And the one really great thing about it is there's a lot of these sequences where they're having battles, and you'll see huge like AT-AT and ATST walkers come in, and they look very realistic just based on the CGI, but also the depth and the way that they're look in comparison to the things around them makes them look so much more realistic. Like they look huge, especially when the AT-ATs come in. They
Mhm.
look huge and they look real and like it's insane. And all of like the Star Destroyers and everything, they look very good but they make sense to scale. And that's one thing that I know Garth Edwards is very good at. He directed Godzilla, and he was very good at kind of making that Godzilla look huge because he always shot it, from the perspective of the humans. And we got the same kind of feel in this movie is that we were kind of on the ground with the rebels, and then we see these huge machines, coming past and fighting, and it looked very realistic, like you were right there on the ground with them.
Mhm.
And I mean, it really puts you into it.
And to comment on that, I mean, this movie is very gritty. It's a very war tone kind of movie. But like, I have to admit, like, this is one of the most original Star Wars movies actually ever made. Like, since the original trilogy, like, it hit everything it needed to hit. And to me, it
Hmm.
felt very original. Like, I felt like I haven't seen this before. Like, I
No,
I
and
really
because
feel like that way.
that was the biggest critique with Force Awakens is that it is like this feels kind of like A New Hope. Like it feels like we've already seen this movie.
Yeah.
We just have some new characters, but essentially what we have is A New Hope. This was one of the most original Star Wars stories ever. I mean, like, and that's a good thing because they needed, to make it
Mhm.
very original. And this is great. It has a lot of the same kind of canon, but it
Mhm.
fits in perfectly with the storyline. Like you can
Yeah.
perfectly watch this, in some sort of marathon, and it makes perfect sense. It leads right into everything
Yeah.
perfectly.
Yeah,
I mean,
and because I mean the tone in this movie is so perfect, and the progression and the three act structure is so perfectly utilized. Is you can perfectly pinpoint when's
mhm.
the first act, where's the second act, and where's the third act.
And the third
And it
act is so good.
oh the
The
third
last
act, I
half an
mean
hour of the movie is so good. The last half an hour
yeah,
is amazing. One of the
and
best
for me
experiences I've had all year.
yeah, and for me, I mean, this movie just gets better and better as it goes through. Like it starts off really good in the first act, it gets even better in the second act, and gets even better and amazing. It's fantastic in the third act. I
And
love this movie. I mean to
and
comment.
I know a big concern that you had, especially with this film, and so did I, was Donnie Yen being casted into the movie. We weren't sure exactly how he could play because he's a martial artist, right? So we're not sure exactly how that would fit in.
I
But it
never
ended
actually.
up paying off greatly. You know, it
Yeah.
ended up being he ended up
Yeah.
being one of the best characters in the film for me. I mean, I love
Yeah,
his character.
I think honestly in the long run, I think Donnie Yen's character, his name is Chiru Imwe, and he plays this force sensitive character. And I'm not going
Yeah,
to give too much detail into his character and what happens with him, but I think that he's honestly going to be one of the most standout characters for Star Wars for years to come. I mean, I think when people look back on this movie, they're just going to think about how much, how much better and better his
yeah.
character gets.
He's
It's
a badass. Yeah, he's
yeah,
a badass in this movie.
it's
He's
definitely
great.
he's definitely a standout, and I mean, that there's some way somehow they're gonna tie his character into some sort of Star Wars TV series somehow. They're gonna
Hmm.
find a way to get like
Yeah,
True Imwe. They're gonna find some sort of way to give more backstory to that character because there obviously is more backstory. I mean, you can. This
yes.
guy has
There's
probably got like because of the age of his character. This guy probably has 40 plus years of like his story into his character's life. So there's definitely going to be some sort of comic line or TV series or video game that's going to like include his character, like no doubt.
Yeah, for sure. And like another thing about this is that he's very mysterious, so we want to get that background. And also Jen Urso's character, who's our
Oh
main
yeah,
character in the film, she was fantastic. Um, I really enjoyed her because she was like the perfect just amount of like badass, but also sort of like she had a certain amount of heart to her too. You know, she
yeah,
like it was a good mix of like you liked her, but she's also kind of a badass. You didn't want to mess with her. Like they mixed
yeah.
it very well.
And that's one of the things that like this is a gritty movie. Like we said, like this movie adds more scope. It adds more dynamic to the rebellion, to Star Wars. Like it's not like the rebellion. Yeah, they're the good guys, but they don't always do everything that you're gonna morally, you're gonna
Yeah.
morally drift to. Like they
And
have.
the Empire is pretty bad in this movie too. I mean, they're pretty evil.
Yeah.
And what's his name? The guy that played the I can't think of his name.
Ben Mendelsohn played Krennic. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, he was great in this movie. I mean, he was a his acting was phenomenal in this film. He
Yeah,
was very good at
director.
being evil.
And a lot of and let me tell you, okay, so a lot of people are always worried about like, okay, wait, you're making a prequel to the original trilogy and you're introducing all these characters and they're all big characters and you're introducing all this new stuff. So why don't we ever see this in the original trilogy? That's going to be like kind of like a continuity error. And it's like, believe me, by the end of this movie, everything makes sense, perfect sense, it
Yes,
pays off,
it
and
fits in very nicely. It's
I
like a
mean,
perfect.
it's like it's snug with it. It's like a game of it's like Tetris. How well this fits into A New Hope. It's and I know like you talked about like Jen Erso. She's the main character, but this movie felt like an ensemble
Yeah, it did
piece.
for sure.
Like you
Especially by the third
definitely.
act. Yeah, by the third act, it felt like we had like a five main characters instead of just the one. You know.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, Jen Erso's character, like, she helps drive the story in this movie, but so did Diego Luna's character, Cassian Andor, who was like the second
Yeah,
main protagonist in this
who is
movie.
really good. He's a
And
Spaniard, and he is very good. He's
he
very good
is
in this movie.
he is a very very good actor. His character, I think, again, like his character is going to be one of those standout characters, and we're probably going to get more backstory to him. Like again, like there are some of these characters that we're probably going to get like some sort of comic line, probably Cassian Andor, and then probably True Imwe, and then possibly even Jyn Erso and maybe Saw Gerrera. Like these are characters that are going to be memorable from years to come. Like now, as great as Force Awakens is, like Ray.
There's some problems with it. Yeah, there is
Yeah,
some problems.
there are definitely some problems with that movie, and I recognized that when I came out of the movie, and I was fighting for a little bit with myself. It's like, did I like this movie? Did I not like this movie? And I love Force Awakens, but I recognize, yeah, I do have some major problems with that movie, and one of them is the fact that like there aren't too many memorable new characters in that. I mean, Captain Phasma wasn't that much. General Hux, I think, is an amazing character, but like Rogue
Yeah,
One brings it even more. And
yeah.
as much as I know a lot of people like Finn, I don't like Finn that much. I think that he's a very, very throwaway character. I know that they're going to utilize him more throughout
I
the
think
rest of the
yeah,
trilogy.
the eighth film he'll probably come around more, but he was just sort of like this middleman, appeal to everybody, sort of get
Hmm.
try to appeal to everybody. And I think Rey is the best character in Force Awakens for sure.
Easily.
She's definitely my favorite. But and with one thing with Rogue One I want to talk about, one of the big issues for me is like there is quite a bit of fan service in this movie. There's a lot of, I mean, like they even did it with Force Awakens, but there's quite a bit in this movie. But It's done pretty well. It's done actually very well. So like
I
it isn't
think
like it's
yeah.
done well enough that you can appreciate it and you can like it. And some of the fan service, it's like it's kind of specific, and there's some funny moments with it, and I think it's fine. I think they did it pretty well, and there wasn't too much of it. There's just kind of the right mix to sort of like, oh yeah, duh, that happened, or like a lot of New Hope stuff is kind of mixed into it, which I really
Mhm.
appreciated. Yeah,
And when it comes to the fan service for me, actually, I think the fan service in this movie was actually perfectly done to the scope that it did. The only thing that I felt like there was kind of, I don't think it's an issue, but more of like a nitpick kind of thing. And that's with some select characters who are in the original trilogy. They appear in this. And where they appear, I feel like it works. It totally makes sense. But I feel like there was another spot in this movie where it would have made more sense if you had them there instead of here. But either way, both work. I just feel like one would have worked a little bit more.
yeah,
And again, no spoilers. And when you go to see this movie, you're going to know probably what we're talking about. You might feel the same way, you might not. But like, it's nothing negative. It's just like a little nitpicky thing. It's just because getting onto the negatives now, because we talked about the positives enough. The negatives that I feel with this movie are just all around just nitpick. It's just seriously that. I mean, like, one
yeah,
of the
little minor
problems,
sort of things. Yeah,
yeah, and I know Jacob and I were talking about this, like, the same thing. Then the opening title actually comes on when it says like Rogue One. It looks really shitty. I mean, I have to say, like, all around this movie is very, very good, but like when it comes up, I mean, honestly, it's a title. Who cares? It just has to show, Rogue One. Blah.
it's really fast. It
But
doesn't look very good. Yeah,
it just looks really, really shitty. I mean, just simple as that. I mean, it doesn't look like they put any work into it. It just feels like they threw text up on the screen that just says Rogue One.
and to talk about that, and a lot of people know this, and a lot of people don't know this, but this movie does not have a screen crawl like we do in the beginning of all of Star Wars. There isn't like Star Wars episode whatever. We just get Rogue One all of a sudden, then it hops in the movie. Um, I would have liked to screen crawl more, but
Yeah.
I assume they are just trying to disassociate themselves from the other, other movies, trying to make it more unique. I would have liked to screen crawl just because I'm used to that sort of,
Yeah.
that
And
feel. But
there are some movies some of the Star Wars movies that don't need the screen crawl as much, but I actually feel like this movie would have like benefited from having a screen crawl, so that way
they
when
could
you
have
get in the
explained
movie,
a lot more.
yeah, so like,
A
okay,
lot of
what's
people
going on?
didn't. A lot of people didn't know that this, like we've said it so many times, they didn't know that this was a prequel to the, the original series. So like, I feel like a string call would have benefited them because people would have understood it probably better going in if they were unaware of the story. But
Mhm.
who knows? They decided not to, and it is really just a sort of a really small nitpicky thing.
Because I
The
mean,
other thing, the other thing I
plots-
noticed that for
yeah,
me that I was nitpicky about, and Matt and I talked about, was that Darth Vader's obviously in this film, as everybody knows, it's been announced,
yeah.
and his voice acting is it
I
sounds
think
different. It isn't bad, but it sounds a lot different than the originals to me.
I didn't feel that way at all because I feel like the look of Darth Vader when he's in the movie, like his costume, the way he acts, the way he moves, his voice acting, I actually thought, I mean, it felt like New Hope. It didn't feel like Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, it definitely felt
It
younger,
felt
but
like New Hope.
it
Like
sounded younger, but it just sounded weird to me at first. And maybe that was just because maybe if I watch it again, then it'll sound fine to me. But when I first heard it, I was like, that sounds kind of weird. It didn't sound bad or anything, but I was like, this sounds like different. But
and
James
I
Earl
think
Jones is older than when he filmed those movies. He's quite a bit older, and
I mean, that's like a given. I mean, he still sounds like Darth Vader from the original trilogy.
oh
I
yeah,
mean, James Earl Jones sounds the same. It's just he sounds just a little bit older. Like you know what I mean? He sounds like a little bit deeper. It sounds a little bit more raspy, but not much. But it fits, and it fits perfectly for me. I didn't have any problems with it, but like specifically, one of the problems Mitch has with it is that it doesn't sound as robotic. It sounds more human. And for me, I don't feel that way. I feel like
yeah.
it meshes
It,
perfectly. It felt like
yeah.
Darth
I think
Vader.
that if I watch A New Hope again, it'll probably work. But it was a lot more like it was a lot more animated when I listened to it. It was a lot more like a lot more inflections. It seemed like, and a lot more like sort of like these ranging sort of tones instead of it being more like kind of monotonous and sort of just like find them and destroy them. Like that sort of always. It was had a little more going on with it, and it wasn't bad. I was like, oh, this just sounds just different, and it's like
Yeah, and
there's a
I
lot
mean,
more to it.
for me, that was a problem that came on. It was a little bit in Empire Strikes Back, but not entirely, because obviously there are some iconic moments and like some really awesome dialogue that is delivered perfectly by James Earl Jones. But they started adding in that more monotone kind of like feel when Darth Vader talks, because
Yeah.
he would like his actions, his dark side, his evil would go through his actions and the subtlety of him, and that makes it much more beautiful. But when he talked, it would be very, straightforward, like he's talking to you like it's a command, like what I say goes. Like I don't have to say this in a very,
You shouldn't have to say
reflective
anything.
kind of way. But in New Hope, I mean, that's how it was. Like he was a very menacing. He was a very like the way he talked, the way like everything about him was very menacing, very intimidating. Like he added more inflections to it. And I think that they noticed that, like, while Darth Vader is at his best in Empire Strikes Back, Matthew Sloan is probably going to be the Darth Vader after James Earl Jones.
Yeah, for sure.
Matt Sloan in a lot of ways is like,
and if you don't know, like Matt Sloan did the voice for Darth Vader in the Force Unleashed series, as well as the Battlefield game, and he's definitely one of the best. Also, he did there's a online show called Chad Vader Day Shift Manager. He's the voice in that, and he is definitely probably the best Darth Vader impersonator out there. And I could see him definitely. I mean, he's probably going to replace. I don't see who else would replace James Earl Jones because he's definitely the best. But I mean, James Earl Jones is still great, and he's probably going to do it until the day he dies because that's, they probably offer him like, here's a huge bundle of cash, come do it, and he's probably like, thanks. But really, there wasn't much that, like, from the structure of the film, it's pretty perfect. Like there wasn't much that you could pick apart from it. And the last thing that Matt and I really were sort of struggling with was Forrest Whitaker's character. But in the long run, I think that he works fine. I just would have liked him to be more impactful because he wasn't, he didn't have much of a role.
And like I said, like I'm fine with Saw Gerrera's character. He wasn't anything big, but he didn't need to be big in this movie because especially how he fits into the story. It's just like he's more of a plot element in this movie rather than a character. I mean, he's still a very, very much animated character, and he's very well thought out. Like how
he's very interesting.
Yeah, he's very interesting, and I like that a lot because, like, in a lot of movies, like, yeah, this character is very bland, doesn't have a lot of personality. Saw Gerrera easily is like one of the most animated and more.
Yeah, anytime he's on the screen, it's just like, what is he gonna do? Because he's kind of strange, and like Forrest Whitaker played it well because he takes a lot of like weird pauses, and like he played it very well. It was like, this is kind of unsettling and unnerving whenever he's on the screen.
Yeah,
especially like later on, it's just like, what's gonna happen? I don't like this at all.
And like, there's only one thing that happens with Saw Gerrera's character, and like that again, it's a nitpicky thing, and we're gonna actually get onto that in our spoiler review, which we're going to actually be doing next. But I mean, honestly, my only other negative about this movie is another nitpicky thing, and that's like, there were opportunities in this movie where Darth Vader could have been in the movie and probably should have been in a little bit more, but it's really nitpicky because when Darth Vader's in this movie, he shines and he's so perfectly utilized the way that he is. It's just like, you kind of feel like he should have been more involved in this movie in like the overall plot. But while he's missing, there is one character in this movie that kind of takes that place where you're just like, okay, so Darth Vader's absent, but this makes a little bit more sense having him. It just feels like with Darth Vader's presence around in New Hope and the original trilogy, it kind of made more sense that he should have been in a little bit in the more forefront, especially since it's Rogue One. It's dealing with the Death Star. That was like the Emperor's baby. That's the Empire's baby. So it made you feel like, even though Darth Vader he does have a presence in this movie, it makes sense when he's on screen. He feels like there was a little bit more opportunity for him there.
Yeah, and it's almost like they kind of gave him a back seat, and I don't know exactly why they did that. Because like he does have some scenes where he's very sweet. I mean, like he has some awesome scenes in the movie. Like, don't get that wrong, but like it just seems like for some reason they put him kind of like on the back burner for some reason, and I'm not really sure why. Because he could have played a lot bigger role. Maybe like you said, like Darth Vader was never really that concerned with like the Death Star. Like that was never really something he cared about.
Yeah.
So maybe in this movie, since this was so like kind of centered around the Death Star, that it made a little more sense to give him kind of a backseat to it because he never really gave, he never really cared about it to begin with. So like, well, he can show up sometimes, but like,
yeah, I mean, and it makes sense. I mean, like Vader is kind of like
we never see the Emperor either. The Emperor is talked about. We never see him though.
And I think that's actually perfect because like the Darth Vader was talked about in New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, and you only see him for like a glimpse in Empire Strikes Back. Like he's not a forefront character. Like he's an overlooming kind of threat. He's off doing other things. Like it makes sense that he's not like in this because like if you even look back to the prequel trilogy, he wasn't even a forefront character until like halfway through Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
He's always been this overlooming character that's has dealings in the background, and like you're always wondering, what's this guy gonna do? What's he thinking? Who is this guy? And I think for
Yeah,
years to
exactly.
come, this movie is going to make the original trilogy so much more perfect, and it's going to bolster it a lot better.
Yeah, this movie is going to stand up very well
Yeah,
with the test of time. I mean,
and
it's
one of the things that I was thinking about earlier today is like when parents show their kids Star Wars, like when they show them Rogue One, when they show them it, like in all this trilogy, it's just going to make it so much better because it's going to clarify things a lot more. It's going to add more voice to it. It's going to be so much more impactful. Uh,
mhm.
so like you have a very very perfect franchise here so far. I mean, aside from the prequel trilogy, but like but yeah, like the way it progresses, like how you have Rogue One fit into New Hope, it's just so perfect. It complements it. It
Yeah,
bolsters it.
definitely go and see this film because I mean, if you're a Star Wars fan, you're gonna love this film. It's hard, like we
And
love
that's
Star
another
Wars,
thing.
and like we went in there and we were trying to be very critical of it because we wanted to make sure that we were very honest. And I mean, like this movie, I think the critics are being too harsh on it. I think it's a lot better than
Oh
what they
yeah.
said it was.
Oh yeah.
For Matt and I, we're fighting between like a 9.5 or maybe even a 10 out of 10 on this film. And
I'm giving it for me it's a 10 out of 10 easily. It's my third favorite Star
yeah,
Wars movie of all
the
time. I like
critics have
New
been
Hope a
very
little bit
harsh on
more.
it.
Like,
Yeah, and
here's the thing. There are some things in Rogue One that are better than in New Hope, but like the way New Hope, its charm, its story, how it presents itself and
yeah,
the characters, I mean, it's such a good movie, but even New Hope's not my favorite. My favorite is Empire Strikes Back. But like
yeah.
Rogue One,
Well, that one's
like
hard to beat.
yeah,
It's hard to beat Empire.
it is hard to beat Empire, but I think that with opportunity, if Disney keeps on the track that they're on, like there's a very good chance that someday they could beat out Empire. I think it'll be it'll be a long shot, but like for
Well,
I think
like
a lot of people,
the way they're hyping it up, it seems like Episode 8 might do that. Episode 8, they're talking about like it might be one of the best Star Wars films, to date. They've been
oh
hyping
yeah,
it up a lot. And I mean, it feels like it's supposed to be very dark with what they've said. So I'm excited to see that. But Rogue One for me is probably 9.5 or a 10 out of 10. I have to see it again to be very definitive on that.
mhm,
But right now it's 9.5 for sure out of 10. I mean, it's
mhm.
pretty damn good. It's hard to get a better Star Wars film than this.
Yeah, and to comment on a few things. If you're a Star Wars fan, you're gonna love this movie. If you're not a Star Wars fan, you probably if you don't like Star Wars, you probably won't like this movie. However, I do think there's more of a chance because I think that this movie adds more flavor. This movie is
Yeah, it's
much
more
more
it's more of a
fresh.
war flick than it is like
Yeah,
like Jedi centric like like there is that the Force is always in it, but like it's way more like a war flick, like something like
yeah,
I don't even know what to compare it to, but I mean it's very much like a war film than it is. So I
and
think there's a lot more to
it
connect with it.
adds it adds something new. It makes it's so fresh. It adds something new, and it respects a lot of the a lot. It respects the Star Wars fans. It respects the Star Wars movies. That I think that this movie, I think, is for a lot of people. I think that if even if you don't like Star Wars, I think that there's a chance that you could like this movie. But if you don't like Star Wars at all, I think there's probably more of a chance you won't like this movie because again, it is very Star Wars.
But definitely go and check it out, and we hope you like it, guys. And this is our spoiler-free review. We're also going to do a spoiler review when we're going to get a little more in depth, talk about a lot of crazy stuff that happens in this film. But if you just want to get the spoiler-free review and then go watch it yourself, this is it. This is the video. Watch this, and you'll find out if we think it's worth seeing. And we both agree that it's definitely worth seeing,
Mhm,
regardless if you're a fan of Star Wars or not.
mhm. All right. Thank you guys for watching, and don't forget to check out our underappreciated series, Box Office Bagasms and Unfiltered. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and please share this video around. We really want you to share it around. Uh,
And please
just
smash that motherfucking like button, guys.
smash that like button.
Please smash it. Smash it.